This is the passive ankle dorsiflexion test, and she's pushing on the wall for the external force. Her left leg is in the third category, and so is her right leg here. This is the active ankle dorsiflexion test. Her left leg just made it to the 2 mark. And here's her right leg, which is also in the 2 mark. This is the active hip flexion on her left leg, and her lateral malleolus is just above her knee, which puts her in the 2 category. Gianluca just measured from the mid-thigh, and now he's going to measure from the hip joint. And this is the right leg for the active hip flexion test. As you can see, her lateral malleolus passed her knee, therefore putting her in the 3 category, just made it to the 3 category. And this is from the hip joint. Now this is the passive hip flexion test. Gianluca is going to push on the client's leg until it can't go any further. As you can see, it just didn't measure with the hip joint, therefore putting it in the 3rd category, almost 4th. You can see better in this test here. Her lateral malleolus just doesn't match up with the measurement tool. And this is her right leg. And as you can see, the lateral malleolus lines up with the hip joint, making a 90-degree angle, putting it into the 4th category. And you can see it better in this test. Yep, the ankle lines up perfectly with the measuring tool. This is the shoulder flexion test. So this is her left arm active and is in the 2 category. Now Gianluca is going to push on it, making it a passive test, and brings it down to a 3. This is her right arm active test, which is already at a 3, so her right shoulder flexion is much better than her left. And this is the passive test. Just doesn't make the 4 mark, putting it in 3. This is the Y test for stability. This is her left leg, so her anterior measurement was 21 centimeters, posterior medial 20.5 centimeters, posterior lateral 28.5 centimeters, making it 29.91%, and her leg is 78 centimeters long. This is her right leg, anterior 22.5 centimeters, posterior medial 22 centimeters, posterior lateral 33 centimeters, making it 33.21%.
In the case of this individual, there was a difference between their active and passive mobility. Whenever there was an external force being applied during the passive test, there was an increase in range of motion. For example, the results for the active ankle dorsiflexion, the right and left knee could only pass the toes 8.5 and 7.5 centimeters respectively, while during the passive test, the knee passed the toes 9 and 10 centimeters respectively. In the hip flexion test, the client could only raise their leg unassisted to a point where the ankle did not pass the mid-thigh of the non-tested leg. But when an external force was applied, they were able to pass that mid-thigh. This is the same case with the shoulder reach, where they were able to lower their fist down their back more when a force was applied. In my opinion, I think the client's mobility is influencing their Y balance test. A good result of ankle dorsiflexion is when your knee passes your toes by 10 centimeters. A good result for hip flexion is that the client can raise their leg past the mid-thigh of the non-tested leg. The client struggled achieving these results even with an external force being applied. With that being said, if there was a greater range of motion of the hip and ankle, the client could have achieved a further reach. In addition, as the client began to reach their limit in terms of range of motion, it created instability. This is evident when the individual at times struggled returning to the start position under control. These assessments can be performed to any individual for any purpose. In the case of Client C, a 73-year-old woman named Georgia, who recently underwent a hip replacement surgery for her right hip, it would be useful to use the hip flexion test to observe her progress and see if her range of motion of the hip joint is improving post-surgery, or in using the white balance test to assess her strength and stability in her leg to see if she can safely return to physical activity.